Today I wanted to give you a way to unlock your profile if you're feeling stuck in any of these spheres or with any of your gene keys. This is such a broad and deep knowledge that I know that we can run into these places where it just feels like we hit a wall and we just can't understand and we can't feel the wisdom. It feels like it gets stuck inside of our belly. And there are things that we can do to help simplify the process, right? There are 64 gene keys and 6 different lines, and that's a lot of different combinations. And each of those gene keys represent a different archetypal energy, and they all carry so much different information. When you compare that with the lines, of which there are only 6, and it's the same energy regardless of what sphere it is, although it shows up with a different keynote, and I'll talk about that as we move through. If you can understand those 6 lines at a deep level, you can tell the story of your profile. You can tell the story of your life. And sometimes that gives you a frame shift. That allows you to see things through a different lens. And in that point that you've been running into a wall and feeling stuck, all of a sudden, something begins to open up. Remember, simple is always correct. Simple is the way to go. And so by taking out some of this complexity, by reading your profile through the lens of the lines, it affords us a breath of fresh air, a new way of seeing things. So I am going to just kind of go off the cuff here and walk our way through a profile and each of the lines and what they could mean or how they could show up in the world. So this person, their first line, and of course their second line, because these are programming partners, and this is the activation sequence. So this is the sphere of life's work. This is the sphere of evolution. And these are both 6 lines. And remember, these are a field. So they work together to either drive you higher towards the city or to pull you lower back down towards the shadow. And the 6th line in the sphere of life's work is keynoted the teacher. And the 6th line in the sphere of evolution is keynoted education and surrender. And this profile is a male. It's actually my profile, if you haven't been able to tell yet. And so I'm going to walk through this. So my life's work, what I'm meant to do in the world, how I'm meant to interact with other people is all about the line of the teacher. And that's because the 6th line is the line of the visionary. It's the line of being able to see a future that other people really can't see yet. And it doesn't make the 6th line any better because the 6th line requires the work of all the other 5 lines in order to bring that vision into reality. But ultimately, this person teaches because they have this drive to help change the world, to help solve problems on a deep level. Not like a 5th line that is practical, right? They're there to solve the problem and get out of there. But this 6th line is all about not just fixing the problem for somebody, not just giving somebody a fish, but teaching them how to fish. So Richard uses an allegory of plumbers, and a 5th line might own a plumbing business, but a 6th line teaches people how to plumb, right? They have an online course that teaches people how to plumb. So I am here to help manifest that vision, to help bring a new way of being into the world. And the way that I do that is via my evolution. And if you remember that evolution is the biggest challenge that you're going to face in your life. It's the thing that is constantly going to continue to show up until you are willing to learn the lesson. And even once you've learned it, there's going to be another layer and it's going to come back again. And so in order for me to be able to teach, I've got to receive first an education. And a way that I receive that education as a 6th line is, remember, 6 lines have this 3-part life, or maybe you've never heard this before. Up until about 29 years old, 6 lines actually live more like third lines. And I have 1 third line in my profile, so you'll see it come up. But third lines are very exploratory. They're very trial and error. They're full of joy. They're kind of just like rolling with the punches of life. They learn through the school of hard knocks. And that is the education, or part of the education, that I needed to receive so that I could teach. So all those things in the moment that I thought of as shadow, that I thought of as negative consequences of choices I had made, in reality, the consequences of those choices gave me the exact education that I need to go out into the world and teach a new way of being. Hey, this is what happened to me, and there is another way, a different way. And ultimately, it requires surrender. And it's funny, right? And you'll see these themes in your profile when you view it from this different lens. My gene key here is detachment, 42, expectation, detachment, celebration. So detachment and surrender. You'll see these themes intimately, but through the line itself, you can see that in order for me to be able to actually take those lessons in, instead of helping them or having them drive my frequency downward, I have to surrender. I have to drop into those experiences and trust that there is something that's going to be useful and helpful in me teaching my vision out into the world. Then we come across this pathway of breakthrough. And if you remember, this is the pathway of challenge. And so these are the things that we're going to work to overcome throughout our life. And ultimately, they're the thing that lead us through to a breakthrough. And this breakthrough comes for some people in an instant. For some people, it's more of a breaking through. And in my case, it's definitely more of a breaking through. And then we come over to our Radiance. And here, the line 2 keynote is marriage. So as this breakthrough occurs, or what is part of driving this breakthrough, is an attachment to something external to myself. And this isn't literal marriage, although it can be, but this is attachment to an idea or a person, a relationship, certainly could be, a place. Sometimes I think about it in a connection to God. But there is some sort of partnership that is required that will allow this flowy second line energy to come out. And ultimately, the second line is all about flowing with the universe. It's all about engaging with what life brings your way and using that as fuel to grow and develop and serve and love and help. And so as I am coming into this place of surrender, this new relationship is what allows me to do that. This new relationship helps me to realize that I don't have to do everything on my own all of the time. And when I'm able to slip into that place, then my radiance begins to emerge. And your radiance is your inner light. It has a lot to do with your health and your aura and your vitality and your life force. And for all of those things to shine out of me so that I can deeply impact other people, I need this other force. Now, it's easy for a second line to get lost in that other force. That second line is a line of passion. It's a line of joy. It's a line of sexuality and sensuality and emotion. And so sometimes getting lost in that other person or that other thing is part of the education that is required to come back so that I can teach. I'm learning still, where is the boundary between what is me and what is not me? How can I be supported and be around these things that allow me to ground myself and allow me to share my light with the world, while not giving myself over completely to them? Because when that happens, that's when the shadow side of the second line starts to come through, which is all about blame and shame and anger and outbursts and denial, not being able to see things, right? Remember, it's this flowing energy with the universe. And sometimes what that means is we don't reflect. We're too busy trying to flow. And so when something doesn't work, we blame something external to ourselves because I'm just this flowy, amazing dancing creature. So it has to be your fault. Coming out of that second line, we move down to our second line purpose. And remember, just like these are programming partners, these are also programming partners. So this is a field. And what we're keynoted here is posture and fluids. So all of the keynotes for the sphere of the purpose as it relates to the activation sequence are physical keynotes, because the activation sequence is there to settle us down into our physical body. Now, I talk often about how I think that chronic disease is largely tied to a spiritual problem. It's a spiritual issue that is manifesting on the physical plane, and it is our bodies and our souls' last-ditch effort to try and get us to listen. And I am convinced my issue is a lower back issue, which of course ties intimately to posture. Because you cannot express your genius through a stumped posture, right? That genius flows through an open spine, an open throat. And so in order for my radiance to shine through, in order for that light to come out of me, my back had to realign. And that has been my journey through the gene keys. It has been an intense physical shift. I tell people I feel like a transformer often when I sit in meditation. I'm like shifting and pulling muscle in different directions and having to breathe into different spaces, and it can be exhausting. And at the same time, I know it is part of the transformation that is required, that is going to help me become this embodied teacher that I'm meant to be in the world. Our purpose is nothing to do with what we're here to do in the world, like our life's work. It's a sense of being. It's how we show up in the world. Beyond that, it's developing a trust and a knowing that you are supported, you are loved, you are a part of everything that is happening around us. And it's keynoted fluids because these second lines have an exchange, right? If you think about a kiss, there's this exchange, this flow, this beautiful marriage that occurs between two things. And that is required for my purpose to shine through. I have to flow. I have to feel like I'm a part of something. I have to know and trust that things are working as they're meant to work. And that allows me then to show up in the energy, in the radiance of trust, of faith, of awakening, of intoxication, of celebration, of justice. And you can start to see how this story comes together as we go now from the activation sequence into the Venus sequence. And the Venus sequence begins where the activation sequence ends. So I'm aligned to in my purpose, but this time it's as it relates to the Venus sequence. And this is keynoted a little bit more in depth. So when you get to the Venus sequence, what you'll find is the keynotes have a bit more information in them. And this is the one place I'm using a little cheat sheet because I can't remember what the words are. So, and it doesn't really matter because remember, the second line is the second line regardless of what sphere it is. However, I just want to be accurate to the system because I know some people are watching this and like really trying to translate it over to their profile. So I just want the added clarity of using the actual words that the gene keys would use. So this second line purpose now, I'm either the accuser at the shadow frequency or the natural at the gift and city frequency. And further, we go into a couple different versions. So there's a repressive tendency for the accuser, which is burying your head in things. And then there is a reactive tendency, which is to respond with blame or anger. And if you remember, that second line energy is all about, it's the dancer, right? It's being in flow with things. However, what happens when we can't own who we are and how we contribute to things is that we blame stuff outside of us, because when things get hard, as a second line, we can't take it because our life is not meant to be hard. And this is in the sphere of the purpose as it relates to relationships. So the way that these things are going to show up is through relationship. This is my purpose as it relates to other beings that my dharma and karma are going to bring forth to me so that my soul can learn its lessons. Remember, coming out of this sphere of purpose is the pathway of dharma. And so emanating from our purpose is our life's path, our life's journey, our soul's focus. So when I am not in flow, I bury my head, and I can attest that this is the truth. I try and, just like an ostrich, dunk my head in the sand, la 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 la, not pay attention to what anyone is saying because they're stupid or they don't understand, or whatever excuse it is that I'm making in my head. The flip side of that, though, is an angry outburst. Because again, this is the second line of denial. So it can't be my fault, it's their fault, and I'm going to let them know it is their fault. This second line intimately tied to emotion, sensuality, sexuality. It's like this electric energy that comes out. And when you are not aware of your frequency, you affect people in a deep, deep way as a second line. In fact, that's the block here for the accuser, is that you don't realize the effect that you are having on people. And there's been so many times in my life where I've been sat down after an exchange and told, you do not understand what you just did to me. On the flip side of that is the natural, and the natural is all about trusting in life. And it's like you have this immediate innate ability to pick up on things that other people don't quite understand. And this, I've been told this my whole life, especially with physical things. Like I pick up sports so quickly, and I'm really fast to adapt and to learn and to flow and to grow with things. And that is the internal gift of the natural. It's this ability to flow with life. And externally, what that flow does is it adds, I don't know if you can see that, sorry, adds ease to somebody's life. Because when I am flowing, it gives permission for other people to flow. They start to realize or recognize that life doesn't need to be so hard. And that's the effect that you can have on people as a second line. It's this deep and powerful release for people. They start to trust because you start to trust. And coming up out of that second line purpose, I get to my sixth line at the sphere of attraction. So this is how I'm calling in the people, places, and things that further my soul's journey. And ultimately, the keynote here, we're back to the sixth line, right? So we're back to this line of the vision. And what happens for 6 lines when that vision doesn't become a reality, which it doesn't, Because remember that 3-part life through the 6th line, I told you already until about 29, it's a 3rd line. Then from about 29 to 51, you're in this middle ground that they call being on the roof, which is almost being separate from the world. And then we come back at 51 years old, 52 years old into the world. The term is off the roof, and we embody all the wisdom that we picked up along the way. However, because of that process, it's so easy for a 6th line to become disappointed. Because you call something in with your sphere of attraction and it seems like it's the thing and it's going so well, and then all of a sudden everything falls apart. And you don't understand, because remember, you have that vision, you have that thing that you're holding that you're meant to bring, and you can feel that there's something deep in you that knows that something is there, and you were able to call it and start manifesting it. At least that's what you thought it was, all to just go away again. And that puts us in this disappointed energy. However, what we can transform that into is this energy of innocence. This return to seeing the world through the eyes of the child, a trust that what you are attracting in is the next step that you need to take in to further your journey, so that you can fulfill your dharma and use this next pathway coming out of here is the pathway of karma. So we learn how to engage with those situations that might be a little bit more difficult through eyes of surrender, through eyes of innocence and purity. And there's actually a couple other keynotes here, which is kind of a way of being associated with this. So like I said, this Venus sequence has some additional information that the other sequences don't have. So when you're in this disappointed state, you are in a state of resignation. You kind of let your head down. And so this person, me, I'm going to go through periods of my life where I've given up. And I can tell you that that is true. It just doesn't make sense, and it's too much to hold. And in that moment, I feel so disappointed. And what I have to remember is those moments is that is part of who I am. And that's why understanding your profile through the 6 lines can really help unlock it. It can help you to see different things. It takes some of the pressure off of needing to know all of the 64 gene keys. Because these 6 energies exactly the same. And so if you can just understand those at a really deep level, you can start to let some things go and to see why things are playing out in your life in a certain way. And what starts to happen on the other end when I'm in innocence is this ecstatic quality. This belief that nature is working out in such a beautiful and loving way. And sometimes I am just overwhelmed by how that works. Interestingly, my gene key here at the sphere of IQ, the city is ecstasy. So another place where these things just seem to tie together in a way that doesn't really make sense, or these themes that just show up that I wouldn't see if I was only looking at it through the gene keys. There's so much information that we have to take in, that we have to contemplate, and that's why it's so important to go slow. Remember the gene keys way, patience. Take your time with this stuff, especially if you have 6 lines. Gentleness with yourself and with others. It's gonna take time to unlearn years and decades of a previous way of seeing the world. Self-inquiry. This is a path of turning within, and I am so clear on all of these things because I've gone within and identified where they have shown up in my life. And I've thought about or contemplated, which is the 4th part here, how these things can serve me and how I have needed them as I learn and grow and adapt. Then we get to the 6th line again that I have. So if you've noticed, I have a lot of 6 lines in my profile, and this is the sphere of IQ. And IQ is the mental pattern that you develop when you are 14 to 21 years old. Basically, when you get overwhelmed, it is your mind's way of shutting yourself down, especially in my case. In other cases, it's a way of controlling the environment, a way of controlling the intense voltages that are rolling through your system in that moment. And in my case especially, this is what's called the objective mind, but it's also the absent mind. So 6 lines, because of this separateness, because of their ability to see this vision, to see a future that others can't quite see yet, it creates almost this separateness between them and life. And if 6 lines aren't careful, that separateness turns into just that. Keep like a hermit, keeping everyone away, and it turns into this indifferent energy. So a 6-line job is that, yes, although you see things through a different lens, your job is to stay engaged. And so it's very easy for my mind to just disengage, to pull away, to go into this disappointed energy, and I just become absent. And this is another thing that I've been told over and over again, that it's like the lights go off when I'm in an emotionally charged situation, especially back before I got into this work. And I can feel it in that moment. It's like I'm going to use the words ice cold, although that oftentimes is more of like a 4th line thing. But it's like I turn into an alien. There's nothing there. It's like the windows of the soul go closed. And it really is unsettling for people. And it really disconnects me from my emotions, which was its job, right? Remember, this is an overwhelming feeling, and it's a pattern that we needed to learn to protect ourselves. That same thing, though, allows me to be truly objective. So one of the gifts that I have is to see both sides of everything. And it can be very frustrating for people because I understand the duality of things. And I understand that both are always right and that everything is a paradox. And so that's a beautiful gift because it allows me to stay true to the moment. It allows me to play and arise in the frequencies that are happening right then and there without getting attached to a story. And then we come across this pathway of intelligence or pathway of defense, and we get to the 1/3 line that exists at the sphere of EQ. And this is keynoted sympathy and apathy. And oh, how these tie together. So EQ, if you remember, is 7 to 14 years old. And it's the emotional ideology that you developed, again, when you feel overwhelmed. It's the closing or shutting off of your emotional system. And look how these tie together. Absence and apathy. So not only does my intellectual way of seeing the world, my intellectual interaction with somebody shut off, but I also get emotionally apathetic. No wonder people tell me I am a zombie. And remember, this 3rd line energy is an energy of joy. It's an energy of fun. It's like just kind of tripping along through life, stumbling. It's very like energetic, energized, and just wants to keep having experiences and drinking new wines and being with new people and friends, and all of that is great. However, it also leads 3rd lines to disengage and run away and just move on to the next thing. And so this third line, the way that it presents with the emotional system is an apathy, which is a running away from one's own feelings. It's like I disengage, and I did, from my feelings at a certain point. And because I don't feel my feelings, I can't feel somebody else's feelings. And that's sympathy, right? It's coming into union with this other person because I can see how their suffering is impacting their lives because I have felt similar emotions to those things. And I know that's borderline on compassion. I'll save that for a different time. But that's the key here, is that you need to be connected to your own emotions. And apathy is a disconnection. It's a running away because you're not willing to be with anything when it becomes uncomfortable. At our higher frequency there, though, we feel into those feelings and we learn how to transmute them. We learn how to share all the experiences that we've had with somebody else, and we're able to make this deep, deep connection on, yes, an emotional level, but also on a soul level. And it's balancing these two things, learning how to stay objective and to have this sense of separateness while also staying engaged in the world, and being able to, because I'm staying engaged in the world, being able to feel what somebody else is trying to convey to me and letting them know that I'm there for them. It's been so easy for me to shut down and go into a place of apathy. And it's not just with others, it's also with my own feelings. I do the same thing. Whenever things get difficult, I just snap into this like zombie mode. The Marine Corps didn't help me there, definitely, because it was just like, shut it down and get shit done. So it played perfectly to my personality before I started getting into this work. Then we come up and we've got the sphere of the SQ, which is my only line 5. And the sphere of the SQ represents your heart, right? If we think about this, if you overlay this on a human body, this is right at the center of your chest. It's right at your heart. And so it's about opening your heart to the world. It's about trusting and spreading love. And this 5th line is all about practicality and power. It's about projection. It's about the voice, frequency. And what the 5th line represents at the sphere of SQ is role models with integrity. And so this person's life, my life, is pushing me in a direction to become a role model for other people by opening my heart, by spreading my love out into the world. And because I have this 5th line here, I can spread those frequencies of love so far. I have such a high level of impact as a 5th line. 5th lines have this quality to them where they are just magnetic. They're fluorescent. They give people a feeling that there's something special about them. And when you tie that into the heart, what an opportunity you have to open the hearts of others, to help them to see that there's a different way of being. And that's why it's a role model with integrity. It's showing the world that when you live with an open heart, when you trust in the gifts that you have, when you believe in your genius, when you believe in God, when you trust in the Synarchy and all the things that are happening around you, look at what's possible. I've felt like that's how I'm supposed to live my life for so long. I've told people over and over again, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I still am not positive what I'm supposed to do. But I do know that my way of being has a way of impacting people on a deep level for whatever reason. And my hunch is it comes from this 5th line at the sphere of SQ. Another thing that this can tell us is, so this ties to 0 to 7 years old in our childhood development, and what I needed at that time was a role model with integrity. And what happens when you don't have that role model with integrity in that time? And that's a way to see all of your lines at the sphere of your SQ, is that's the quality that you needed from when you are 0 to 7 years old. And there is nothing wrong if you didn't get that quality. I want to be very clear. I didn't get this quality. But it is something to reflect on. It doesn't doom you to a life that you don't want for the rest of your life, but it is worth taking a look at. And so what happened, and what often happens to a fifth line, is that instead of being driven by love, I was driven by power. My role models were all about power, because that is what the fifth line craves. And again, how the gene key ties in here is so interesting. I have 35 here, so it's hunger, adventure, boundlessness. I had this deep hunger for power that was insatiable. And it's because I didn't have somebody to show me the power of love. Because ultimately, the power of love is so much more powerful than any other force out there. When you use the power of love, you get the power. It's just in a totally different way. It's in a way that serves. It's in a way that puts others before you. Or you could just chase the power until you get to a place where everything begins to fall apart. And then finally, we get to the sphere of the core, where I have a first line. And the sphere of the core, this is the wound that we come into the world with. When our very first cell shows up in our mother's womb, we already have this wound, because it is the moment that we become separate. And the first line here is keynoted repression and honesty. So repression, what we are repressing our entire lives as first line of the core, is that separateness, that feeling that we are not safe, that we are not okay, that the world is not looking out for us. It's like this underlying fear, this underlying panic that runs our lives because we do not feel whole. And that lack of feeling whole leads, in the case of a first line, to drive down within and to spiral downward within and to try and figure out how to approach the world themselves, because this first line is about going within. It's about needing safety, needing security. And that's ultimately why we're repressing this feeling of fear, because we need to feel stable. And there is no way to feel stable if you're separate in the world. And so your whole life goes to trying to repress that feeling and trying to fill that void in any way possible. What we need to do as this first line here is to be honest with ourselves, to look inward, which is our specialty as our first line, and to recognize that yes, we are separate, but there's also a force that is pulling you back towards unity and union. And when you can be honest with yourself, and when you can see that fear and how it was driving your life, that's when you begin to transmute it. And in that transmutation, that's when we go from the core to the vocation, right? I'm able to use the energy that's in this key in service to the whole. And so let's go now into our last bit of our profile lines reading, which is the pearl sequence. So I was just up here in the core. I'm going to pull that same sphere down here. So this is still, it's the same sphere, but in the pearl sequence, just like this, the purpose was the same sphere, right, for both, but it has a different name here. And that is the sphere of your vocation. And you're going to have the same line. So I'm a line 1 in the sphere of my vocation. And that is keynoted the script writer, AKA production. Can never remember production. I had to look down at that one. This blue is not the best. I'm going to try and stick with it though. So first lines, remember, about going within. And in my vocation, we just said, there's this feeling, this fear that's driving all of my behavior. And when I can look at it and when I can be honest, what I can then do is learn how to be with that fear, how to use it for fuel. And the first lines are all about going into a cave, getting with God, figuring out what needs to come out to be of the most service to the world and showing back up with it. That's the first line vocation. It's going to require some alone time. It's going to require a beautiful place in nature that allows you to connect to these deeper currents and to bring forth something from the void, something new to the world. It's really a beautiful process. It's also a hard and a painful process. Right now, I'm engaging in that process. I'm creating this very video as I go by just trying to listen to this thing that's inside of me and say what streams through. Trying not to have a filter. I'm not the one writing. I'm not the one speaking. There's something that speaks through me, at least when it's functioning at its highest frequency or capacity. Not always, certainly. And you can tell. I'm sure you can tell. I can certainly tell when it's forced, when it's me speaking. And that's when I lose track of this first line vocation. Then we come across here and we've got the sphere of our culture. And the sphere of your culture represents your tribe. It represents where you settle in the world, who you settle with. It's like calling in your soul family. If this sphere is nature, this sphere is nurture. And I'm a first line at the sphere of culture, which is keynoted the entrepreneur. Entrepreneur. There's a second keynote here, which is individual. So same theme, right? I go within. This is about me. The first line is the base of the trigrams. It's what everything, it's the foundation. It's what everything is built upon. And so my place is to create for myself. Here we are, right? This person is going to be the beacon that calls in all sorts of other people to help them create a business and get something across to the world. And that something is going to come from this first line vocation, from the void, from going within. And a point of comparison might be helpful here. The second line here, which remember was keynoted marriage in the sphere of radiance, is keynoted partnership in the sphere of your culture. So you're designed to work with somebody else through your process. But this person isn't so, right? They're the one that plants the flag and calls all the other people in to help. And it's not to say that I only work by myself. That's important. I'm going to need help from all of the other 5 lines. That's the case with all of the lines. We are designed as a group organism, a group collective. We need one another to reach our capacity and our fulfillment. But it's got to start somewhere, and it starts with the first line. Then we move up and down, and we've got the sphere of our brand. And this is actually the same sphere as the sphere of your life's work. So you already know I'm a 6th line here. The difference between life's work and brand, and I've got a whole video on this, is that your life's work is what your ego is doing in the world. It's what your personality does. Your brand is your soul's flavor. It's your style. It's your frequency. It's on a deeper level. And what this is keynoted here is vision and education. So my soul is here to convey a vision to the world. Remember, I can see things on a wider scale. I can see what is happening from a place of objectivity, right? To go back to the IQ. And that allows me to know where we've gone astray. And it allows me to see that there's a different way of doing things. That's the vision. The education comes in because this vision is something that is far off and it's totally separate from how the world is operating now. So the way that I need to communicate is through education. Again, surprised that we're here. It's like, in order to shift somebody's paradigm, you can't just like say a sentence. It requires a logical step-by-step process, similar to the Golden Path. That's what Richard Rudd, the founder of the Gene Keys, did with the Golden Path. He gave us a step-by-step logical process. In reality, these things are hologenetic, right? They're all one on top of the other, inside of one another, but by having this path, it allows us to take in this information in a step-by-step way, which helps set our mind, our heart, and our body at ease so that the energy can work through us and this transformation can occur. And so it's my job to figure out what is the vision that I see, which I'm pretty clear on, but then how do I educate people towards that vision, which right now I'm using the Gene Keys to drive that education, but I know in the core of my being that the Gene Keys are not forever for me. The Gene Keys are a step that takes me to the next thing. And that's my evolution talking. That's that surrender, that education talking. Also interesting that education shows up twice, right? I have that in my evolution and here it is again in my brand. And I love to learn things. I'm like a sponge, constantly taking things in. And it's needed because I need to teach. So of course I need all of this information because I need to be able to share it. And then we get to the final sphere. And that is the sphere of the pearl, fed by all of the other spheres. And this is the thing, it's like the harvest. It's what shows up at the end when we're able to settle in to who we're really meant to be. Right? It's a pearl because we have all of this suffering, all of this grit that's inside of us. And if you know anything about oysters, that grit is actually how the pearl is formed. It transmutes that irritation into something beautiful. And that is the pearl. And in my case, I, again, am a 6th line here, which is all about nature. And the pearl has a lot to do with your prosperity, of course, your abundance, the flow through your life. And as a line 6 here, I'm always going to have enough to do what I need to do. I understand that like nature, my life is in cycles and ebbs and flows. And by understanding that, I don't have to let myself go off the deep end when I'm in a period of my life that is low tide. When everything has seemingly flowed away from me. By understanding these lines, I'm able to just breathe through that. And the past 3 days for me have been just that. It's been this place of like, man, what is going on right now? And at the same time, in the back of my mind, I know that it's not forever. And that allows me to stay in a more heightened frequency. It used to be, I would have entire weekends where I would not get off the couch because I didn't trust that it was going to come back. I felt like the thing that I was in was going to be the thing that I was in forever. I didn't see the cycles and the flow of nature. I didn't trust in nature. This tells me that my life isn't really mine. My life belongs to Gaia. My life belongs to the universe. And the more I can get out of the way and allow nature to flow through me, to trust in the processes, the more I'm going to be able to flow with life. The more I'm going to be able to make that vision a reality for myself and for the rest of the world. Well, I hope that was a helpful way of seeing a Gene Keys profile. I encourage you to do this on your own. Go through them, sit with them. Once you understand each of the 6 lines, it becomes so much easier. You don't have to memorize all the keynotes. You don't even have to have a profile. You can see so clearly in the world when somebody is in one of these 6 energies. And I know I didn't have any 4th lines. I don't have any 4th lines in my profile. So if you have a bunch of 4th lines, take your time. 4th lines can be very political, but they can also be very nurturing. They can be very frigid, but they can also be very romantic. So that is our profile reading. I want to invite you to our wisdom call. I've got one tomorrow, which is Thursday, I believe the 22nd. Don't quote me on that though, I'm pretty sure. And then the 29th, 22nd of August, and then 29th of August. Both of those are at noon. If you're not familiar with the wisdom calls, it's a chance to connect with me directly, other people that are in our little community, ask questions about your gene keys, ask questions about the lines, ask questions about your life or situations in your life, really whatever you want. It's just an opportunity to connect. I will link that in the description, and I would love to see you there. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work.